Okay, I'm back. All right, so this can be confusing. If you don't turn this the correct way, you're going to have a backwards binding. So the bottom piece, okay, you're going to take it and it's laying like this. You're just going to take it and lay it flat on your table. The top piece, here's your top piece. You're going to take it and open it up and twist it down, okay, and lay it on top of the other side so it's even. You want to make sure the corners are straight. Just lay it on top so that both are right sides together. So then we're going to pin it on the corners, just like we did on our binding when we were sewing the binding strips together. And then we're going to take our ruler again, make sure you get the corners straight, corner to corner. Take your marking pencil and mark it. Make sure it's marked exactly corner to corner. Okay. And now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and sew it. And let's see how this comes out, because last time I had it twisted incorrectly. It's tricky. So if you do it wrong, which we've all done it wrong, you just take the seam out and do it again. All right, so take it to the sewing machine. Make sure there's nothing else underneath, and the material's flat. This is kind of hard to get it on the machine because it's a little tight, but we're going to put it right on the corner and sew along our line. Okay. And you have to move your fabric up because it catches on your table, so then you're not able to sew your straight line correctly. Okay, that looks pretty good, even though my thread got bunched up. Okay, now you can take your pins out, and then we're going to straighten it out like this. And there it is. It matches. It's going the correct way. Okay, so we have this little bit of fabric sticking out here. As long as you get the top piece, the left side, twisted downwards, it should go okay. So, it's not pulling. If it's pulling too much, you're going to have to take your seam out and re-sew it. But that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is flip it back up and trim off the excess corner here. You can do it with your scissors. It's not a big deal. Just trim 1/4 of an inch to the seam line. Just make sure you have 1/4 of an inch left. Like that. And that way you can, open it up either on a machine or with the iron, or you could just do it by hand. And so when you put it back together, there it is. Okay, so that looks good. So I'm going to take a couple pins and pin it down so that I can sew the rest of it down. And then we are going, that pin's crooked. We're going to hand stitch it to the back side of the quilt. And I have my blue quilt to hand stitch also. I haven't gotten it done yet. So we're going to, I'll work on either this one or that one first. And I'll show you how we fold it over and hand stitch it to the back of the quilt. Okay, I'm going to sew the rest of this down. We're going to start where we left off. Right, that's where I left off before. Here's my mitered corner. So we're going to put it where we left off, maybe overlap it a little bit. So a 1/4 of an inch. Almost done. Then I overlap it on the bottom where I started my seam earlier also. So it's nice and secure. Okay, going to cut off our thread and take out our pins. All right, looks good. And what we're going to do is fold it over to the back side. The back side has dots on it so that the orange binding will show off nicely. So I thought it would look good with my tiger stripes. Okay, so we're going to, I guess we could fold it over on the back side and pin a few areas. I don't pin the whole thing at once because when I'm working, sewing it on by hand, all the pins in the quilt, when I'm moving it around, I just get jabbed all over. So I'm going to, what I usually do is start away from the corner when I pin it, and I pin it down so that it covers over the seam line. Okay, so you don't want your seam line showing where we sewed. See the seam line? We don't want the stitching out. We want to cover up the stitching line. Okay, so we're going to pin that down. And I usually do a corner. I pin away from the corner and then I go back up and I make my mitered corner and pin it down, and that's where I start. I start sewing, say from down here, and then I go up and around my corner that way. So you just want to flatten it down past the seam line, pin it down so that you're going to be making your hand stitches on the seam line, so the seam line isn't going to be showing. And what I want to show you is the mitered corner. Now this pin's a little bit close, but okay, so I have this side flat, and then I'm going to pull this side down, and there you have a little mitered corner. So straighten that out and put a pin in it. We're going to cover the seam line up and pin that, and then we will hand stitch that so that it stays in place. People, some people do it on the machine, the back side, but it will also show on the front side if you want to see a seam on your front. I don't want to see that seam on the front. I just want to have a hidden stitch. It's called a blind stitch. So I'm going to sew it by hand so I don't see that stitch. I mean, you will see a little bit of it on the back. I will probably use white thread, so you'll see a little bit of it. But if your fabric matches the binding and the fabric that you're attaching it to, you can use that same color of thread so that it's pretty much, you can't see the hand stitch very well. But my fabric color does not match very well. One's orangish white and the other one's blue and white. So I can use white or orange, but I will probably see the orange against the white. So I'm going to just probably use white for my thread. But it's up to you, you know, if you don't mind seeing more of the color, use a color. So, okay, that's about all I usually pin down right around the corner. And then as I go, I'll take out my pin from here when I'm starting to sew, and I'll put it in up here. Like, I'll go from this side, take a pin out, and place it here as I go around. So that way I'm using the same amount of pins, and I'm not jabbing myself with pins because the whole thing is pinned. Because I'll jab one into my leg because the quilt is laying on my lap as I'm stitching up here. So yes, you will jab yourself if you do the whole thing. So that's my video for today, and I'm going to start another one when I start to sew my binding on the back side. So I will talk to you then. Have a good day and keep quilting and have fun doing it. Bye-bye.